We are recording. All right, so you can state your name and affiliation for the record.
Sure. Mark Montgomery, I'm a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies.
Rebecca Heinrichs, and I'm a senior fellow here at Hudson Institute.
Morgan Ortegas.
Chris Miller, author of Chip War.
Bill Evanina, CEO of the Evanina Group and former director of the National Counterintelligence and Security Center.
This is Kara Frederick.
Nathan Lemur, executive director of the Digital First Project.
Emily DeLabriere. I'm a co-founder of Horizon Advisory and a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies.
Dan Rundy. I'm a senior vice president at the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
Jonathan Ward, author of China's Vision of Victory.
Shahzad Qazi, chief operating officer of CBB International.
Nizak Nikokhtar. I chair the national security practice at Wiley Ryan, former U.S. government official.
Peter Mattis, I'm the president of the Jamestown Foundation.
Michael Sobolik.
Kelly Curry, former U.S. ambassador to the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations.
I'm Anna Kwok, the executive director of the Hong Kong Democracy Council.
Can you outline the threats that the Chinese Communist Party poses to Americans, our way of life, and that of free peoples everywhere?
The Chinese Communist Party poses a comprehensive threat to free peoples across the globe. So there's a military threat. There's a security threat, there's an economic threat, and there's a political threat. And all of these things are intertwined.
The values that we hold of human freedom and market economy and the respect for individual rights that make our country unique and special. China is looking to replace those values with the values of the Chinese Communist Party. Totalitarian state control, authoritarianism, atheism, and the loss of individual rights and liberties, and the loss of freedom.
Xi Jinping and the CCP evaluate healthy, free democracies as an existential threat to not just the party's survival inside of China as a single-party dictatorship, but they view it as a threat to their broader global ambitions.
The threat of the Chinese Communist Party is that they try to instill fear into everyone's mind. No matter where you are from, where you're living, what you're doing, their goal is to make you feel fearful before you say anything to criticize the Chinese Communist Party.
Beijing's industrial influence, economic warfare, national strategy writ large hinges on building asymmetric relationships with the United States to ensure that our national production, our politicians, our commercial champions depend on China. If Beijing is able to do this, that means that if China says jump, we jump, whether we like it or not.
The normalization of trade relationships and then the blooming of the trade relationship ultimately not only eviscerated America's industrial base and of course wreaked havoc amongst working class communities in the United States, but it led to a wholesale transfer of our supply chains, especially some of our most critical supply chains as they relate to pharmaceutical products, as they relate to rare earth minerals, and even a lot of defense technology to the People's Republic of China.
It allows them to bend and distort every single element of the economy, land, labor, electricity, raw material prices, to purposely underprice U.S. other industries around the world to gain a competitive advantage and hollow out our industries and get that advantage of supply chains so they can force us to bend to their will.
Over the past several decades, China has infiltrated so many parts of our tech ecosystem in ways that I think many voters don't fully realize. And it speaks to the need for Congress and the federal government to realize this is a real threat. This is the next step in the Cold War.
Whether it be telecoms, financial services, or energy, they want those owners, stockholders, executive managers, security functions say, wait, we've been compromised? At the same time, make it a calculus for us, knowing that if the time comes for activity in South China Sea or otherwise, we're going to pull this lever, which is going to create mass havoc in America, and which will reduce and minimize appetite for the American people to get engaged in anything. If their power is out, they can't get gasoline, if they can't make telephone calls, all those things are part of the strategic plan of the Communist Party of China.
We have had a rude awakening, even in the past few weeks, where we know Salt Typhoon, this is an incursion into our telecoms network. At least 8 telecommunications companies have been compromised. All of that information has been exploited by CCP-linked actors. Then you have the Anthem hack. Then you have the Equifax hack. Then you have the Marriott hack. Now you have Salt Typhoon. All of this information, all of these seemingly disparate data sets can be integrated, especially with the advent of artificial intelligence, and you have the most fulsome pattern of life and intelligence picture that a former Intel analyst like me would absolutely salivate over.
All modern life depends on semiconductors, and a huge share of the world's semiconductors are either manufactured in Taiwan or in China. When they're made in China, there's lots of risks about security of supply, about data security. They're made in Taiwan, there's a risk that China's threats to Taiwan's autonomy and Taiwan's ability to govern itself threatens our ability to acquire the technologies we need from Taiwan to make our economy and our society function. So our entire tech sector really depends on peace in the Taiwan Straits and a secure supply of trustworthy semiconductors.
It's not just economic coercion, it's not just the destruction of our industries, it's not just the desire to push us out of markets and, be the dominant economic power. It's that underpins the entirety of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, the entirety of China's vision of victory, and it ultimately underpins their military power, which they intend to use against the United States at a time of their choosing, and they've made that very clear.
I mean, let's just look at the waters, at the seas around China in Asia. China would like to own the waterways and to determine which ships go where. That affects what you buy in the United States. That affects what your business exports. That affects where you can go.
So clearly, China wants to reduce or eliminate American influence in the Western Pacific, American influence among Northeast Asian and Southeast Asian countries. This will have a dramatic impact on the United States citizenry. We'll lose a significant amount of our economic productivity, our economic wealth, if we don't have access to these countries.
China is in the midst of a massive military investment program, and it is designing a military specifically to push the United States out of its near region, but then it doesn't want to stop there. It wants to continue to expand and grow its ability to coerce and contest the United States and our allies globally.
If all those countries, their number one trading partner is China. If all those countries, their number one, China holds all of the debt of these countries. If 140 countries, all their telecom systems are run by Huawei. If all 140 of these countries, their ports and airports are run by China. If the Belt and Road Initiative is what builds their roads and their digital infrastructure, that's a hell of a problem for the United States of America and for free peoples.
We can only win in a geopolitical or technology race or a military race with China if we make everyone aware of the threats first. And I think this committee has been in the forefront, if not the originators, of having a bipartisan effort to show America what the threat is and how it's manifested across the landscape of America at multiple levels.
I think what was so foundationally unprecedented by what the House Select Committee did is that it made the American public the judges. Right? That's amazing. That's transparency. That is giving control back to the American people. Washington isn't going to talk to you and hold things back from you. Washington is going to lay out the full case so you can come to your own judgment.
We have not had an ability to tell the story in an open forum of what this threat is, what it looks like, tastes like, and how it's manifested. This committee has taken that ball and ran with it.
A lot of the times when we think about the CCP and the atrocities they commit, we only think of it as something very far away, right? But with my hearing on the transnational repression, it really tells Americans how close the threat of CCP is, and also it gives our faces to the story. We're not just a number, but we're actually people who are living, who are struggling under the threats and the repression of the CCP.
I had the chance to go to Manteno, Illinois, and Big Rapids, Michigan, where Chinese companies are actively building facilities funded by US taxpayer dollars, and the local populations don't want that. And the Select Committee is providing a platform for that and helping these local movements try to fight back against the CCP. And it's absolutely, it sounds funny to say, but it's absolutely a David versus Goliath issue.
And the ability to influence not only Americans, but have codels go around the world in dealing with their allies from South Asia to Europe to South America, understanding the global threat that's incurred in terms of the CCP, but also the multi-levels of which the committee is hitting and addressing.
The best shot the United States has and the West has at coming up with what the heck we do about this is the Select Committee. Look at the hearings you've done. Look at the approach, the bipartisan approach of the staff. Look at the bipartisan approach of the members. But we needed a catalyst. We needed to break the regular order of things. The challenge is so big and so dramatic that we needed a Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party.
And if you're unaware of everything else the Chinese Communist Party is doing, it's impossible to motivate the rest of the country to make the investments that we need to make in order to convince the Chinese Communist Party not to act aggressively against American core interests.
And what the House Select Committee has done in terms of unearthing facts that I think people really didn't know or didn't appreciate at a fundamental level is astounding. The level of capital flows that are not just going to China, but are flowing straight into the Chinese Communist Party's pockets that they are then using to, one, turn more countries against the United States, two, fund genocide, and three, build probably what is on the brink to potentially become the most powerful military in the world.
But one of the things I love about the committee is that you've brought businesses into the picture. You've brought CEOs into the picture. And a lot of my work on this subject, which has had a lot of different dimensions over the years, also led me to that place where, fundamentally we win or lose as a free market, private sector, $30 trillion economy. We win or lose through our businesses and business leaders, through the decisions that are not just made in Washington, but that are made in C-suites and boards across America. Frankly, that's how we won the Second World War, converting industrial might into military power. It's how we won the Cold War, arguably, by having that technological edge that was ultimately in business sectors. You need Washington, you need Wall Street, you need Silicon Valley, you need boards and C-suites, and we need to start executing the right decision set that allows us not only to de-risk from China, to execute strategic decoupling, but to start to win in global markets, retake the battle for global trade, emerging markets, all of that, secure the supply chains. And that's how you start to change the game in the 2020s so that ultimately this is a contest we can win.
The Select Committee ringing the alarm on what's going to happen to your business if you continue to try to work with China as a good faith partner, that is a service. And I believe that that should continue to progress. We should advance that research because American business leaders, I think they're starting to understand what happens when they treat the CCP as a partner and not a competitor, and a challenger and an adversary. I'll say it because when it's life and death between an infusion of Chinese cash, they don't understand that they're making a deal with the devil.
And they are already trying to weaken our own freedom at home with malign influence, with the presence of United Front work. And that's something that the Select Committee has done incredible work at highlighting. Every single American needs to understand what United Front work is, because it's malign influence within our own borders that targets our own system of government.
The Select Committee's report on the Chinese Communist Party's role in the fentanyl crisis, groundbreaking report. Every American should at a minimum read the summary pages because it proved and it showed that the Chinese Communist Party leadership have directly fueled the opioid crisis in America. Not only does the Chinese government understand and know that they are selling the chemical precursors, they're actually responsible for it. They encourage it, they aid it, they abet it.
It is the Chinese government who is behind this. It is the Chinese government whose policy has become to sow discord in the United States and elsewhere around the world by the export of poison. This fentanyl report has put the threat from China on a whole different plane that I don't think America generally understood before. We are at war The Chinese have declared war, and I don't think we would have understood that had it not been for the House Select Committee's work.
We have to recognize that these are real threats that we face as a nation. And this is not about going abroad looking for monsters. The monsters are coming, whether we want them to or not.
An organization or an institution like the Select Committee is a place that draws together some serious expertise on China in a way that can't really be found on elsewhere on Capitol Hill.
There's a lot of technical details behind many of the issues that the committee and Congress in general has to deal with, and it's important to connect the technical aspects with the impacts on businesses. I think the committee's done an extraordinary job in bringing together these different topic areas and understanding what steps Congress can take to make sure America is more secure.
The committee very adroitly took a challenging issue like the threat that emanates from the Chinese Communist Party in the military, economic, and cultural realms, and worked in great detail across the congressional committees, respecting the jurisdiction of the other committees, while at the same time producing a coherent description of the threat China presented to the United States.
Not only the education process, the information process, the awareness, but also from policy development, legislation.
Looking at the problems, but also marrying those problems with solutions.
A lot of it because of the leadership of the CCP Select Committee. Rip and Replace was just added to the NDAA, full funding for Rip and Replace. That means that there's going to be no infrastructure that is embedded with Chinese-made products. And now we can rip that out and replace it with better equipment to make sure that if you're a family in Montana, if you're an education facility, a school in North Dakota or in Colorado, you have as secure connectivity as anywhere else around the country.
The committee has been able to advance new frameworks and new approaches to competing with China that break the mold of the efforts that haven't worked over the past few years or longer. And one example is that the committee has socialized the idea of revoking China's permanent normal trade relations status. That's something that was absolutely unheard of as a mainstream way of thinking before that came out in Select Committee recommendations. And that's the kind of thing that actually would create a paradigm shift.
We can use the CCP Select Committee not just defending against China, but also to allow our innovators and our entrepreneurs and our American ideas to win the day. And I think that's a huge part of the conversation.
And to address these foundational topics, which will help us not only understand what isn't working correctly in the US-China relationship today, but also shape our understanding of what do we want out of the relationship, what are our national objectives that make us a more prosperous and a more secure country.
Here in Congress, this is a place where Republicans and Democrats have to sit, have to talk to each other. And as a result, this is one of those institutions that provides the bipartisan ballast for the American government to look at this challenge.
This committee is only scratching at the surface with their ability to learn, grow, educate, inform, and legislate so that we can get to a place where we could be proactive instead of reactive in competing with the Communist Party of China.
I'm confident that decades from now, when the history books are written about why America won this competition with the CCP, that story will not be able to be told without the Select Committee.